Hello and welcome to another free code session. My name is Jason Bach, and I'm going to do a little bit of an update with rocks and some things I've been doing off camera. Sometimes I like to just get my head down, work on stuff and not necessarily record it. And there were a bunch of little bugs that I found here and there after I got back from VS Live Orlando because I did a CodeGen update and some other things. So I'm going to do just basically a recap of everything that I've been working on since I got back. I'm recording this early December, so there's lots of things that I'm also going to be doing in the future. As I've always said many times over and over and over again, there's always something to work on. So let's get into what I have been doing. So the first thing is this issue here, which is I'm no longer emitting nullable or nullable context attributes. I think this is something that's changed in .NET 8. Actually, let's go to the issue here. So as you can see, I was actually playing around with time provider because that's a new type in .NET 8. And I found that what happened is I was emitting these attributes and that didn't seem to be an issue. But in .NET 8, they're making it a warning, I believe, which I'm like, okay, that's fine. So it's just one of those attributes I filter out and I no longer have put into the generated code. So that one's done. This is a fun one. I found out that if a type is nullable or something like that, let's actually go look at the code here. Yeah, if I want to mock a I type of int question mark nullable, the name ends up being this, and that's not a valid file name. So all I did is I already filter out a couple of things, and I just filter out a question mark. And I think I say nullable or something like that now, but a valid word that can actually be a file name. One thing that just came to mind is I believe I'm duplicating that code with the create and the make, which through the magic of pens, I'm going to write down right now that what I should do is not duplicate the file name generation in create and make. And if you can read my handwriting, and I don't even know if you can read that, but there you go. So I'll put that in as an issue once I'm done recording this. So yeah, I just had forgotten that I had repeated it, but that was an interesting one. It just popped out of nowhere. I forget where I found it. Usually I put in here where I find it. I don't remember which type I found this with, but no matter, it's now a fixed thing. Default arguments using default and allow null. I forgot what this was. So when a method has a default argument that uses allow null, like right here, rocks passes that into an argument which causes a certain error. And this was found in GraphQL because it's a new package I added to the CodeGen test app. So that got fixed. I don't remember how or what I did. I somehow just got it to work. Oh, okay. Yeah, I put it in the comment. This can probably be fixed by putting a null forgiving or damn it operator on every parameter passed into an argument. So it looks a little weird when you actually look at the generated code because I'm always passing in an exclamation point at the end. I mean, a lot of the generated code, I've been actually thinking of proposing to do a talk at conferences, something like lessons learned with source generators in C#, because there's so many things like setting up your package, how to reference it, the fact that you want to use a global namespace, fully qualified name with all of your types, using the @ sign is a good thing, just on and on and on and on and on. There's so many things that you want to do because it just makes it simpler and it actually makes things more correct, if that's a correct phrase. So this one is, I'm always just saying, just shut up compiler. Let me pass this in. And if was what null or not null or whatever, and it should have been. That's on the user that did this. So that one's fixed. Duplicate methods are generated if generic parameter name changes. Yeah. So if you can see here, the abstract class, the generic type is B here, and then here it's S. And the way I was figuring this out, those were two distinct methods, and they shouldn't be. They should be one. The generic parameterness doesn't come into play here. So that was a fairly easy one. I just had to go through the match code and figure out if when I'm considering generic parameters, to also do some looks at them and say if it's not filled in, then it doesn't matter, because it doesn't matter if the type argument name type parameter name is different. Static members in an interface causes shim issues. So here I've got some, again, we can't do static abstract members because we can't pass an interface to a generic parameter if it has static abstract members. But you can do this, that's fine, and we should be able to generate this, that's also fine. But I was also including these and thinking they needed to be shimmed, and so I just had to filter them out and not include those. We're going to get to the whole mockable method or mockable member discovery in a little bit later on in this episode. Recreating a member confuses rocks. By the way, if it wasn't clear, 7.3.0 now targets .NET 8. So that release also changed so that the code that I'm generating will use .NET 8 C# 12 features. One of the things I don't do in rocks, and maybe I should, but if I target a runtime, I'm generating code for that runtime. So I don't do something which you can, and arguably you should in your generator, is say, well, if I'm targeting .NET 8, then maybe I do this. Or if I'm targeting .NET 7, then I do this. And you can do that. You could easily do that, but I just don't. I've never been interested in doing that because it's more work. I can't be bothered. It's more work than what I really want to do. So I'm like, if you really need .NET 7 or .NET 6 support, then you can use a previous version. And yeah, there may be bugs in it that I'm not going to backport, but you know, I'm just one guy. I'm just one person, and there's only so much I want to do. Maybe somebody could put that in an issue and then handle that themselves and do the switching. But you know, that's something I could put it on the backlog. Okay, Magic Pen time. Second time in this video. Gen code for specific TFMs. And I guarantee you that's going to have I might even make a new label, like really low priority or something like that, because I don't know if I'd ever get to that. But in any event, recreating a member. So this one is one of those things where, yeah, we have a base type that defines a method like this, and then we have an override like this, and then here it comes in and says, hey, guess what? I want to do this, but I'm actually going to give it an object where this is a script scope. So we didn't handle this right. I don't remember if what you're supposed to do, I love my comments here, that I was overthinking things, landed on the simple solution. I don't remember if what you're supposed to do, I could throw this in Sharp Lab real quick. If you're supposed to create two, I think you are. This one and this one. I'm not sure. I don't remember. But whatever I was doing wasn't correct. And now that's fixed. Types with internal abstract members. Again, you think you handle it. I thought I had something where, oh, that's right. Okay, I just read the bug. This was an interesting one. I added suppose or aspose, or I would imagine it's a suppose because the other pronunciation doesn't sound that good. But I added this package, and it's one that's paid for, although it's on NuGet. You have to get a license, but I don't care about that. I'm only loading it to do reflection and introspection on it to then see if rocks can handle it. That's all I care about. And they do obfuscation, which I'm probably saying that incorrectly. If you don't know what that is, it's basically taking a piece of code. It can just be text. It can be a binary shippable product like a DLL or something like that. and you run this tool against it such that names of things are really, really twisted and awful and bad, and people can't really figure out exactly what's going on just by looking at it, because all the nice names that we have, like get customer, suddenly gets blown up into a really awful string that has nothing to do with getting a customer or getting an email or something like that. And it only does it for non-public things, because the public surface, that still has to make sense. So a developer can look at it and go, yes, I can program against this. This is done as a way to make it harder for people to reverse engineer code. My take on obfuscation is it isn't worth it. I would love to have a conversation with people that think otherwise, change my mind. You could put that meme up there with me. Maybe I'll put that, I'll put that up there in my video, or would it be over there? I don't know, but either way, maybe I'll try to find the meme and put in there, obfuscation is worthless, change my mind. But, and for people that are making paid products, they might say, oh no, it's not. The thing is though, is if you put anything, and this is something that I've mentioned so much when I've done the Blazor workshop this year with my friends Rocky and Alan at VS Live, is, oh my God, we're going to put source code or our stuff in the browser. And I'm like, yeah, you do that with Angular, you do that with React, you do that with a native application on your phone or anything. If you put code in any format on a machine that a user uses directly, it's not a website, it's not something done on a middleware or backend or whatever you want to call it, somebody can figure out what you're doing. It's just a matter of time. I don't know. I remember seeing a video on the Xbox Series X, like their architecture and how they handle things, to prevent people from hacking games or the hardware or anything like that. And they said that basically they almost assume everything on the device is hacked. And that's kind of their mindset to design the hardware so that it's resilient against any type of hacking. You have to almost be able to control everything, because people are just going to break it. I saw a video, and I'm going to remind myself to put a link to it. It was by a person named Christopher Domas. I hope I say his last name right, but wonderful videos. I wish he would do more, because this stuff was always fascinating. He created a mobfuscator, which basically changed all of your assembly code instructions to move instructions. Everything in your executable became an MOV. And it's because he said, if you use tools like, is it IDEA or IDA, or there's a famous tool out there that does reverse engineering of native executables in Windows. And you can look at patterns in how things are coded to kind of see, that's how you start to kind of get that matrix view. Oh, that's what this is doing. When he created it for his code that he used this obfuscator on, it was one line down, because everything was a move instruction. And it was slow. It was bad. He wasn't doing it to be feasible. He was just like, could you do it? In kind of an attempt to say, I don't think anybody would ever want to try to de-obfuscate this stuff. Well, of course, if I can find the video, somebody did. People found a way to look at the move instructions and figure out what it was actually doing. So I find this kind of thing a little unhelpful. And in this case, what happened is they have a type that's public, but they have an internal abstract member that gets obfuscated with a name that starts with 4. And so you can't, you can actually see it in the additional context. You can't actually override that, because that's an unspeakable name. That's not you can't reference it. You can't use it. I'm forgetting the term that they use in Roslyn, but you can't do that. So this is a type that could be exposed, and you could get a subclass of that type, but you yourself can't actually create your own subclass of it, which I find is kind of an odd design. So I basically had to go through and figure out, okay, how do I do this? And I came up with a strategy just to say, okay, this is what we do, and handle it that way. So those types of things are no longer an issue. I never thought I was going to hit this, but I did. I have 2 NuGet packages in my CodeGen test app, DNS client and Suppose email packages, they both have a DNS client, DNS query options class. They don't do the same thing. I didn't look to see if they have the exact same methods. Doesn't matter. Exactly the same type. Putting global doesn't help either because you can't differentiate between the two. And I thought probably there's an old video where I'm like, oh, I'll never run into this. I did. So I'm like, how in the world am I going to handle this? I'm like, this can't be a rocks thing. This just has to be, what happens if you just reference those two packages in your application? And now one says, nope, there's two. Which one do you want? And so you can use an alias. And then you put an external alias at the top of your file. And you can find aliases using this code. So, and as I gave thanks to some people that pointed me in the right direction with this stuff. So it took a little bit of time, but now what I do is if there is an alias for a type because of the assembly it's in from the package it's in, I just use that alias instead of global, and then it all works. And then I have to put the external alias at the top of the file or in the right spot at the top of the file, but that all works. This is an extremely edge case, but I can now support it. The one thing though I can't do is create my own aliases. So the user still has to go into the project file and put in an alias for that reference, but they'd have to do that whether they were using rocks or not. So that's something that I still need the user to do. But if they do that, rocks will honor it, pick it up, and then everything will be fine. Okay, so that's all of the bugs I fixed. Again, updated it for .NET 8. I did some code gen updates. I mentioned I added some packages. So I've got more things that I'm now looking at, and that's good. I also spent some time because, again, I don't have a lot of usage. I don't have a lot of users for this. So I'm like, how do I find out what kind of bugs do I have? And so I started looking just through the MOQ and NSubstitute issues list, and some of them have no similar functionality. Like there's something that MOQ does that is just not in rocks. It's not a feature, or NSubstitute has that. So I wasn't looking for those. I was more like, if it has a bug, is it something that will mess up rocks? And so I looked through a couple of them, and as you can see, most of these, if you really want to look like, okay, just take a look at these URLs and these URLs, there you go. You can look these up later if you want. A fair amount of these actually have to do with the fact that they all use Castle Core, Castle Dynamic Proxy, and it doesn't support what it needs to do. So they can fix their stuff. I don't have that dependency, so I don't have to wait on that. So I'm like, that's kind of nice. There was one though that it did actually cause an issue, and I've now logged it. I'll mention it in a moment, but it's something that I think I can easily fix. But I did find out, oh yeah, that's Rock suffers from the same issue. So hopefully we'll get to fixing that. I already forgot what I said I'm going to talk about later on in the episode. So if I don't mention that, don't yell at me in the comments. And you can't dislike a video anymore on YouTube, but don't give me the thumbs down. But anyway, so I also did this, and it did uncover a bug, and that will be fixed in 8.0, which I'm going to be working on in videos in the future, along with some other stuff with auto deconstruct. You can see here I've got some notes where I'm going to be updating it to .NET 8, changing the package stuff, doing some other settings, some other things, mostly just a cleanup to get it to target .NET 8. With rocks, I am definitely going to be making a breaking chains version. I'm 99.999% sure I'm going to be doing this. And I'll explain why it's going to be a breaking thing in a moment. The first thing I want to do is address this pointer argument and span of T argument and how I'm handling those span of types. I did pointer argument before, and I stopped because I forgot that unmanaged function pointers were getting in the way, and you can't use that with what I wanted to do with pointer argument. But I think in a recent episode, I changed this so that you can say, yes, it's a pointer, but is it just a regular pointer to like an int, or is it a unmanaged function pointer? And with that in place, then I'll be able to use a pointer argument if you have a pointer. Again, this is a very small edge case. The vast majority of interfaces that are out there don't have pointers in them, much less do they have unmanaged function pointers. But it is something that could happen, and I'm just curious to see if I can support it. I also think by doing the pointer argument, I think I can potentially do something with span of and memory and read-only span and those types, so that I don't have to code gen those either. Some of them I will. Ref structs in general, I don't think I can do a generalistic type, but I think for specific ones like span of, I can. So I want to spend some time in there because, again, I want to try to get rid of code gen unless it's needed, which we'll get to in a moment. But that's what I want to work on. Another one is the refactoring. This stuff with get mockable methods, properties, and events, the code is just huge. And I really just need to take the time and say, break it up into a class and structure the logic within that class correctly, just because it will make it, I think, easier to navigate and read and understand. It's still going to be complicated, but the way it is now, it's a god-awful mess. And that is definitely something, though, and I cringe when I have to go into, because I'm like, ugh, just ugh. I know it's going to be kind of a mess. So I just want to go into there and refactor all that stuff. So hopefully I come up with something that's easier to maintain in the future. This is the big one. This is one that I've toyed with before. And hold on, I'm gonna bring up Visual Studio because I've done some perf work. Okay, well that took forever. And then I also got a text from the USPS. I think it was it USPS or just the Postal Service? It was, yeah, United States Postal Service, where my package is on hold for an invalid recipient address. And I'm looking at the site, I'm going, yeah, this looks like a complete phishing type of site. I'm like, no, I'm not buying that for a second. So in any event, yeah, they would see, this thing is like with anything, if there's a problem, they would say, don't click on this. They would say, go to our official site, you find it. And, yeah, I'm not doing that. I am going to look up the URL later, though, just not to like actually go to the site anymore, but just to see if it's been reported as a phishing site. So gotta be careful with that stuff. So the thing I've been doing is, can you go there? Okay. So this is probably killing my performance. I should have had this up first, but it took forever because when I'm recording, it takes time. I've actually been toying of buying a desktop unit and doing like recording and capturing that way or something like that, just because maybe that would be faster. I don't know. We'll see. But in any event, so yes. So this is the way I do it right now. So if you're given a simple type that looks like this, this is what will be generated. And everything works fine. The thing that I want to get rid of, though, is all these casts. That's the thing I've noticed, is like all these are kind of generic things. Like if I look at method here, can it tell me? What is that? Yeah, it's just a delegate, which is surprising. I thought I'd actually expose that as a type of T-hand or like a what the funk actually is, but I don't. So, but either way, that has a cast, that has a cast. These all have casts. And I started thinking, if I got rid of these casts, could I potentially make things faster? And long story short, what I landed on is what you see here. So you can see there's no longer any casts. That just calls, that does a check, but that will call, blah, blah, blah. Now, I don't have this 100% set in stone just yet, but I worked through a bunch of things. One of the things I like about this is that I get rid of the extension methods. They all end up, for example, in this type that is generated called iSimpleCreate. It's just basically what I've done before, except it's now a type in and of itself. That's where the mock goes. And then I have some other code down here where I generate like, this I think is what would be added or need to be changed is stuff like this. And then the adornments would change like that. The one thing I have to generate though now at compile time is this class. So this is where you'd say, oh, these are my types. This is the return. Here are the arguments and so on. And so that way and then I also have to create all the lists here that I use. But one thing I've noticed is that it also, by doing this, I've gotten rid of potentially, oh, this property has to be exposed, but you shouldn't be calling it. There's some place in Rocks where you'll see that comment where it's like, this is not being called by users or something like that. This approach gets rid of that because everything with the way the classes are nested and stuff like that, it just doesn't happen anymore. So it's a little bit safer that way. And it also, because it's not an extension method, it's only on these types. There's also, I think it makes the IntelliSense a little cleaner. It makes things just a tiny bit simpler. So I actually wanted to do this as a tuple type that then I could alias, because now you can alias any type in C#12. But the problem with that ended up being that tuple types are value types. And so when I was passing them around, like I think I do down, where is that? Here, I pass in that handler to the adornments, and then that does things with it. By doing that, you're passing the copy, and then what I was changing in here with like a callback and return value wasn't sticking with the original thing, and I didn't want to copy back and do all that other stuff. So I ended up saying, okay, this is what I'm going to have to change. I'm going to have this base type now with the method adornments that automatically will have, understand what what is this? The handler, which should be down here. Yeah, there's a base one, and then this one return, and then there'll just be one with callback that'll be in between. I already have most of this. I'm just gonna have to tweak it to work with what I need. But what ends up is not a lot of code gen. There's definitely gonna be a lot of changes with this. But one of the things is that I'll have to generate these types and these lists for each thing, whereas I already have one list that has all the handlers, but none of it is strongly typed. So this will get it to being strongly typed. I created this simple example. I did some testing with benchmark.net, and what I found was kind of nice. So I kind of repeated the tests that are in the benchmark mocknet project, and to construct one is almost identical. There's actually a little bit less allocation now, but we're talking like 18 to 22 nanoseconds. It's almost indistinguishable. So, I almost consider that to be noise. This isn't. So the verification is now faster and it allocates less memory. The same thing with the callback. It's faster and it allocates less memory. So this definitely seems like something I want to go and pursue and do, because yes, it will be a breaking change. If you look at, for example, if I go to the test that I'm doing with, we'll say verify here, you'll see where this used to be an extension method. It will now be a property on this. It's very subtle, but it is a breaking change. And I wanted to do this other work with pointers and span of and all that other stuff before I get to this. Okay. But, and here's the other thing. You notice that's no longer new expectations. It's not rock create to be specific, because we're creating an actual type here. So what I'm going to do is move to for attribute with metadata name. Phenomenon. It's something that if you do source generators, you run into, and the team is strongly advocating that people should do that for source generators. Auto deconstruct doesn't. And I've had some interesting discussions with some people at Microsoft about that, but that's neither here nor there. With rocks, I've always just looked at a method invocation. With this, because I'm generating that type, how would rock.create do that without an activator create instance? And I was like, that's messy. I don't want it to have to do that internally. So what I'm going to do is actually introduce some attributes, rock create attribute and rock make attribute. And you put those at the assembly level, and then my code will do that. I have another project. I'm not going to bring it up, but I was testing that out, and that's definitely promising. I didn't do any perf tests on that. But if you put all the types in one file and say, here's all the things I want to mock, then you just will follow this pattern and say, oh yeah, here's the thing I wanted to mock. Here's the way I wanted to mock it, and its expectations. That's just the naming pattern that I follow, and you're off to the races. Same stuff as before. So that's going to take a fair amount of work, but I think it's worth it. So that's the plan for the future. Lots of things to work on, lots of stuff to dive into and potentially go, oh crap, I didn't realize this, and everything falls apart. But again, that's why it's kind of on the list here. I might actually move these things up. In fact, that's a good idea. And then leave this one for the last, for 8.0. Because if it comes to the point where I really can't do it, my stuff is already the fastest. And I'm like, this just makes it a little bit faster, which is kind of nice. That's the plan for the future, along with other things that I have in the pipe. There's always, as I say all the time, there's always stuff to work on. Thank you all for watching. Leave comments and questions below. See you in the next episode.